Well, welcome back to my video series where I work through the challenges in my book, The C Sharp Player's Guide. So this week we are on the third challenge in the final battle. So we've already done the last 2 weeks, we've already done the true programmer and we've done this building character to get things started. This one was huge. This building character laid the foundation for a lot of stuff. This true programmer one was fairly simple. And now we're going to move on to this actions and players one is the one we're doing today. So the idea with this challenge is basically this. You if you're watching this, you probably have the book. You probably have already seen it. But the basic idea here is right now we're having the characters take a turn, and really we don't want the characters to be deciding. They're not the decider. They don't have a mind of their own. We want the a player that controls them to make that decision instead. So we want to shift this over and kind of like inject this additional concept of a player that manages a party and then have the player that controls that party make their decision. We don't other than that, we don't have to do anything else. Like this is just like a fixed every single time we're gonna rest or do nothing as the book calls it. It's gonna we just happen to call it rest action this time. So we're gonna just kind of squeeze in the middle here this extra concept of a player. It's still gonna, for all practical purposes, it's gonna look the same, but we're gonna shift the load from of decision making from just the character just pick something to something else decides for the character, which will give us flexibility in the long run. In particular, it gives us the flexibility to have a human control the characters or a computer control the characters. And so again, I'm gonna kind of do what I've been doing so far in this challenge and not do CRC cards or anything else like that, but rather just kind of like sketch things out in code. And then we'll just kind of keep going down that path. But so we know we need to squeeze in this concept of um, I'm just this is interesting. I'm just kind of this is happening live. Uh, I, I'm looking at the objectives. The game needs to be able to represent action types. Each action should be able to run when asked. The game needs to include a do nothing action, which displays the same text as in the previous challenges. Both of those we have actually already achieved. So the first two bullet points, as far as this is concerned, it's already done. Um, so I'm we can kind of skip through those, which is nice. That maybe means I could have saved some of this until later. But the game needs to be able to represent different player types, and the player needs the ability to pick an action for a character they control. So I do think that means there's some sort of, because this could be any different type of player. This to me feels like it's either an abstract class or it's an interface, and an interface is the most flexible. So it's usually the better default. If you don't have a good reason to use an abstract class, it often makes sense to say, if you don't want to like force like a very strict type hierarchy, it usually makes sense to go with an interface. So let's do a public interface, and this is a like a player interface, and then this. So what we had here, this take turn. Basically, we're just gonna move. We're gonna move this over to here, and but we do need, like in this case, we do need to know what character it's for. So we'll put that there, and then we'll actually delete this for now, which is going to make some stuff not compiled. That's okay. Like I said, we're kind of at this point, we're just kind of sketching stuff out using code as our medium, and then we'll do, and then we need like a computer AI player that is an IPlayer. It's our one and only type so far, but we'll add in another one later. And now here, this should just say return new rest action with the character. So now we have a computer AI player that's control that can make a choice um, for a character. So now down here where we were asking the character to take a turn, what we need is, instead of that, we need some player or another to make that decision. So again, I'm still kind of sketching stuff out here, but we could do something like I player hero hero heroes player and public I player monsters player. So they each have a controller. But so by the way, we like right now we could have one player that does both. But thinking ahead, like we do want this ability for two different players to handle this. Um, so I'm gonna intentionally separate them. And now right here, what we'll do is we'll say for the well, okay, complicated. Um, one of two things has to happen. Either in this case, we would need to maybe pass in heroes player. So we pass in the player, and then we do player dot take turn for a character. So now we're asking the player to do it, and now that allows us to swap out one player type for a totally different one. We do need to initialize these, and I think that could be done by just passing these in like we've done with a lot of other things. And now we kind of working our way up the chain here. But now we can just pass in new computer AI player, new computer AI player. So two new instances, one that's a player that controls the heroes, one that controls the monsters. I actually think, again, I think that's probably enough to do it. Now, one thing we could do here is before we were putting, let's see, where is it? We were doing this thread.sleep here. I think we could maybe move that out of there and like make it feel like I'm gonna think about this for a second, even though it really doesn't need to think that hard, right? Like this is just to make it like to slow the game down so we can actually watch it happening. But um, we can move that to there, and yeah. So still, like again, from an outside observer, we wouldn't be able to tell that anything really changed here. But we do know now that there is a player in the middle, and like we. So for example, well, yeah, to illustrate like why this having this extra flexibility might matter. Like we're gonna build a human controlled player in a minute, uh, but just to kind of illustrate like how this could work, we could do this. So now we can have a fast computer AI and a slow computer AI, and now we got to do make one of them that chooses fast, one that chooses slow. So now we got this extra flexibility about decision making. This waits 5 seconds for Skeleton to make a turn. And then RB's turn and goes super fast. Skeleton takes another 5 seconds. 5 seconds or 10? Yeah, 5 seconds. So like now we have like we can apply different strategies for making a choice about the action. Like I said, the one we're gonna build is one that lets the human pick it. And we'll use the console window to like allow the player to do that. Um, but it gives us that flexibility by having this extra interface in here that does that and stuff. So that's to hopefully kind of illustrate like why does it matter that we're doing this. even though we haven't really accomplished anything, is it gives these interfaces give us this extra flexibility. It allows us to swap it with something else. And the only guy who has to know that we're using like the fast or the slow computer AI player is our main method here. Everything else, because it's using an interface like the battle, it doesn't care how that's done. It can just be whatever. Now, another question people might have is, why did I create two of these when I could have created one? Because I really could have. I could have done just passed in the same reference for both of those twice. Like I could have done it that way. I think that works for the short term where it is a computer AI both times, but in reality, I kind of feel like in the long term, these are meant to be separate entities, separate things that are controlling it. And if for example, let's suppose we had more than one action type and we wanted to like alternate, so they're like this guy would have to remember what he chose last time so that he can make a different choice next time, something like, well, I don't like if the AI that we want is, I'm never gonna use a potion twice, or I'm never gonna attack twice, or whatever it is, then we need to keep track of state about, and this guy would have to remember it. He'd have to have some fields or some properties that is keeping track of what actions he's done or whatever that needs to be. And so to allow them to be two separate players allows them to each have their own state, their own like memory of like what they've done in the past. So in my mind, it's actually better, even though it has the same basic behavior. I like creating two different objects for it. I think we kind of touched on this before. This thing just has um, two players, and they're kind of separated from the party, which meant we had to like pass the player down in here. Alternatively, maybe that like we could put in here, we could put that here. So public IPlayer player, and maybe we pass in the player here. And now if we've got that there, then in our, where's that? In this method here, we would not have to, we could just get, oops, okay. We could just get the player from the party if the party is the thing keeping track of it. And I don't like, that's not a bad way to approach it either. Um, Given that in the future we're gonna have like, I don't know if I don't know, like some people are going to have read this and other people won't, but if you read ahead, you'll see that like we're gonna end up with many different parties. Like when the heroes win, there's another party of monsters right behind them, and when you beat them, then there's another one. Like there's this whole like series of battles. And so in that case, it's the player that's controlling the monsters is gonna like, it doesn't just belong to a single party, but like a series of parties potentially. So that might be a reason to not tie it so tightly to the party class. So maybe that's a reason why I'm just going to leave this the way we had it just a second ago. But I think you could do it that way and it could work, and that would like, honestly, anytime you see this like repeated names, heroes player heroes, monsters player monsters, like that's a sign that maybe it should be done that way, because all parties, every party should have a player associated with it. And in this case, we're doing that association by having like parallel sets of properties, and that definitely works. I mean, we've seen it work, but there's an argument there of maybe doing it differently. So I don't know. It's one of those things that we might change our mind later about and decide we want to do it differently to put that into the party. Again, like there's with this sort of like design stuff, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. And there are some ways that are unequivocally better or worse than other ways, but there is still a lot of subjectivity to it. There's, I mean, is one or the other of those designs definitely better? I don't know that there really is. Like I said, given that a player is not necessarily tied to just a single party, but to a sequence of parties, could be a reason to separate it. I don't know. Either way, I think could work, and you can make your own choice about which style you prefer. But I think that let me just double check this and just make sure. Yeah, I think just looking over that challenge, I think we've done everything. And it didn't take us a whole lot longer than the last one. This one's 300 XP. So in our case though, the first challenge we did actually got us set up pretty well, because we did already have actions defined. Let's do nothing or rest action. Like we already had that put in there, and otherwise we would have had to introduce that, and we didn't have to do that. So this one ended up being not too bad. Oh, I should get rid of that. Don't need that. Yeah, I think that covers everything, and I think we are done with this challenge for now. So I will see you guys next time.